What's up, all you wonderful people? Today's topic is going to be about something that, in my opinion, is arguably one of the most important parts of our body aside from our vital organs, and that is going to be joints. And no, I'm not talking about the devil's lettuce. I'm talking about the joints in our bodies that, without them, movement would be impossible, non-existent. Forget about it. Ain't going nowhere. Stuck. Immobile. You get the point, so let's hop right into it. Joints serve as the intersection between two bones, and they are all over our bodies. They also serve as a way of providing stability and protection for some of our vital organs, like the brain, which is something that I'll get into in a little bit. But first, it's important to know that joints typically fall into one of three categories, and that'll be diarthrotic, amphiarthrotic, or synarthrotic joints. That means that you either have joints that are rigid / they don't move, you have joints that are slightly movable, and you have joints that are freely movable. Examples of synarthrotic joints are sutures and syndesmoses. Sutures are joints that are held together by inflexible connective tissue that interlock to join bones together, while syndesmoses join bones together that are relatively further apart from one another via an interosseous membrane. So, a great example of sutures are what exists on our skull. And if you look closely, you can see a little squiggly lines there. Those squiggly lines are the sutures. And what you can see there is that they are holding together the different parts of the skull bone. So, that squiggly line that you see here, and that travels all the way over to the other side, and the one in the middle here, that's helping keep together the frontal bone and our parietal bones. Again, you don't want these to be freely movable, because then that means you can just expand all of that, and then you're gonna have potential susceptibility to injuries as far as the brain goes. You can find the interosseous membrane in your forearm between your radius and your ulna. So the radius is going to be the bone that's on that thumb side, while the ulna is going to be the bone that's on your pinky side, and that is joined together by the interosseous membrane. And again, you don't want that to be freely movable, because then daily tasks become very close to impossible to do, if not entirely impossible. And I mean daily activities like just picking something up, holding something, driving, like all of that is out of the water. An example of amphiarthrotic joints are cartilaginous joints. Cartilage is tough, elastic connective tissue that reduces friction between bones. They provide less stability than synarthrotic joints, but they exchange some of that stability for flexibility. These primarily serve as shock absorbers, and great examples of these are going to be your intervertebral discs within your spinal cord, your pubic symphyses, which is going to help provide stability to your pelvis, and this rib cage, which again, that's something that we want to have some movement in there, as that is going to help us breathe, but we don't want that so freely movable that it again leaves our organs open to potential exposure and problems and damage. Lastly, and this is what I will be spending most of the video on, are your synovial joints, and these are going to be your diarthrotic joints. Now, diarthrotic, that means that these are your freely movable joints, and they are going to come with a joint capsule that has a synovial membrane, and that synovial membrane is going to secrete synovial fluid, which is going to help keep your joints lubricated so that you can freely move your body with reduced friction. A lot of the times when we move our shoulder and we feel like a clicking noise, it doesn't just have to be in the shoulder, it can be in your wrists or anywhere else for that matter. Chances are is that those are two bones grinding against each other, which means that you have lost some synovial fluid within that area. With that being said, there are 5 types of synovial joints that I'm going to explain to you. The first type of synovial joint that I'm going to talk to you about is your ball and socket joints. And these are the type of joints that are going to help you do pretty much all range of movement. So you can do flexion, you can do extension, abduction, adduction, medial rotation, lateral rotation, and some circumduction, as demonstrated here in the glenohumeral joint or the shoulder joint. Next, we have hinge joints, and these are going to be primarily responsible for flexion and extension. So you'll find these hinge joints in your fingers, so flexion and extension here, your elbows, flexion and extension there, your knees, and your toes, which I'm not going to demonstrate in this video because you get the idea. Chances are, if you've ever hit the robot on the dance floor, then you most likely have used your hinge joints. The next synovial joint to talk about is a pivot joint, and the most common one is found between cervical vertebra 1 and cervical vertebra 2. And what that is going to do is allow for rotation. So anytime you are looking to your left or your right, you are using that pivot joint. Condyloid joints are responsible for flexion, extension, and side-to-side movements. So the most common one here is going to be in your wrist, as we can do flexion and extension, and then this side-to-side movement or waving. And lastly, you have your saddle joints, which is going to be responsible for flexion, extension, abduction, and adduction. And what you're gonna find here is that the thumb is actually a saddle joint because it can do flexion and extension, but it can also do that adduction and abduction. And that's not something that those other fingers are really doing. Technically, they can a little bit, but we're not going to classify those as saddle joints. We're going to keep those classified as hinge joints. And that's it for today's video on joints. By now, you should have an overview of what joints are and what they do and the different kinds of them. And you can go ahead and exercise those joints by liking, subscribing, following, sharing, comment, whatever platform you are seeing this on. Please go ahead and do those things and exercise those joints for me, and I'll see you guys next time.